NUFC Matters shows for free a week. But if you want to support the channel, there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast or video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications option. Hit the thanks button to buy a super sticker. You can do this on the live chat too. You can also join our Patreon page or buy us a coffee at the link in all of our video descriptions below. We are also looking for sponsors. If you want our latest advertising rates and how you can get involved, then email John at nufcmatters1892@gmail.com.
Just a question of taste with you, well, you've gone sour. You want the world plus everything, but you won't work an hour. And now your questions are get creeping and you go and buy her flowers. You throw away the dreams we had, boy. I won't allow it. I said we're gonna fall out. Let's see you get out. I think we're gonna fall out. So shut your mouth.
Good evening, welcome to NUFC Matters. It is the professionals on Sunday. Sorry we're slightly late there. Only chance we had to have a bit of a catch up. We hadn't spoken to each other.
Mainly my fault, sorry everybody.
But we needed to have a chat and it was good to have a bit banter with the lads. But good to have a bit banter with you as well. We will do an hour and a half still. I'll keep an eye on this match as well. Only 8 minutes left to play. Spurs still beating Manchester United by 1-0. Liverpool, of course, winning by 2-1 against Wolves. And yeah, thank you. I've seen all the happy birthday messages. 53 today. Very quiet day. I've been lambasted by the lads. I've had no alcohol. I've had copious amounts of Lint chocolates. I'm going to have a bit of red velvet cake later on. I've had my Sunday dinner and I've just caught up on lots of nice messages from different people. And yeah, happy days. Lots of people also congratulating us and saying well done on the old poetry thing that I did the other day. I did manage to get it recorded. Joe Allen thankfully recorded it. So I will stick it up on the channel for those of you who want to watch it. And you can give us some honest feedback. But onto the football. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't great. And usually I don't have a great deal to say. I will give you my views. Because I won't get much of a chance to say anything on the fans forum tomorrow night, I don't think. Well, the lads will all have certain opinions about that. My social media posts were exactly how I felt. You know what? It is disappointing. Of course, nobody likes to see Newcastle United get beat. I genuinely felt disappointed because I thought that was our best chance of getting something at the Etihad for the first time in a long while. But we didn't. It was the manner that it happened. It was disappointing. And you know what, from my perspective, it's not acceptable when you see players slumping, pointing, and not putting the effort in to get back. And there was quite a few people there. I really find it hard to pinpoint anybody who could come out of that game with any praise. And I'm not going to start naming names. You know, everybody was culpable. It was a poor team performance. And ultimately, it was worrying in the sense that when we collapse, we can collapse spectacularly, and that was the biggest concern for me. We did it against Bournemouth, we've done it against Manchester City, and I just try to be a bit more positive than others at the end of the game. As usual, when you post something on Twitter, you're always going to get a bit of stick, but that's just the nature of the beast. I switch it off and move on and enjoyed the rest of my night last night. But listen, we got beat. It's one game. If the same happens next Sunday and the same happens against Liverpool, I'll be concerned. We need to bounce back next weekend. The players know that those fans who travelled down to Manchester City a performance, but it wasn't good enough. But you've got to remain positive. And as I said last night, Newcastle United's for life. It's not just for cup finals. And too many people out there willing to go over the top when we get a result or put a decent set of run of fixtures together. And too many people go over the top when we lose a game against the current league champions, by 4 goals to 0 at their ground. So for me, let's concentrate on the positives. Let's look ahead to Forest next week. Stu, I've had my say. What about you?
Well, before I have my say, I want to wish you publicly a happy birthday, Steve.
Cheers, mate.
And I think what you've done over the last 5 years has brought a good few number of Newcastle United fans together, and long may it continue. And I know, strangely for a promoter, you don't like getting praise, but you deserve it. And we're all very proud to be part of this platform, and long may it continue.
Thank you. That's the second time I've heard the word proud. The first time was from my daughters this morning. And you know what? That's better than any present in the world. They both said they were proud. They both said that they were proud. They both said they were proud that I was their dad. So that's very nice to have that. You know what I mean? So that's worth its weight in gold. But thank you, Stu. That means a lot coming from you as well. Cheers, mate.
No problem, mate. Well, talking of yesterday's game, is the glass half full? Is the glass half empty? Or could it just be halfway? You know, there's several ways of looking at it. You can say, well, that's 12 wins out of 15, or it's 3 defeats out of 4. They're both right. So, where do you go? But for me, it was a reminder that we are where we are for a reason. And it's unreasonable to expect us to overachieve with the high intensity every week. But saying that shouldn't give a free pass to individuals and the collective, because it was a subpar performance. And it should be called out, and they shouldn't get that free pass. It hurts. It frustrates. We probably because we know we can do better, and we are better. And it was so passive, the way they just wanted to sit back and admire the way Manchester City were playing, because we'll let them do that. But there was no missed chances. There was no hard luck story. There was no VAR decision. So we can't bemoan bad luck. But it just shows if we drop our intensity and drop our focus and our concentration, we become an average team. Because I don't think the Premier League's seen a team, never mind Newcastle, who can be so good one week and so bad the next. And that's happened several times this season. But we can all be wise after the event, and that's important. But for me, before the game started, we had 3 defenders with a combined age of 100 years old. When you're playing against a team that will attack you if you let them, they will go with pace down the wing. And something that's frustrated me since for a long time is the way the midfield is far too flat. It's a straight line, and Man City are experts at just having someone between that gap, which was a chasm yesterday, between the defence and midfield, someone floating around, and they'll knock the ball about until that pass gets through to the man in space. And then everyone's scrambling, everyone gets put out of position, and we made it too easy for them. And I can say, right, I wouldn't have played Trippier, and it's not about him, because every single person who started that game, no one would have got more than 6 out of 10, and that's me being very kind, who started the game. But when you have that, I don't know how to say this. Yeah, I just knew after 5 minutes we were going to be in for a long afternoon, and I knew we were. And I am probably the biggest supporter of Eddie Howe. Any regular viewer on this channel will know I never say a bad word about him. I think we should be hugely grateful that he's our manager. But if I can see that sitting in Dubai on a huge TV screen, watching these gaps and watching the system wasn't working, I would like to think that he could. And this for me is a situation where, is it a bit stubbornness? Is it a bit, no, it will work, it'll continue to work. But I want to, there's 2 puns here, trot out one of my most used phrases is horses for courses. And when you're playing a team like Man City, you need pace at the back. And for me, Tino Livramento should have started. And when he came on, he wasn't threatened by the pace. He had a steady enough game. And I think sometimes Eddie can be too loyal to the players, and that's why Joe Willock started. I don't think he's done anything to deserve a start. I know people will point out when he scored 2 goals against Birmingham, but he fits in and out of games. And when you're playing a team like Man City, if you're going to let them have the ball, they will pass the backside of you. And you need someone who's going to get the foot in, but once they've got the ball, be composed with it. And for us, watching it, our blue chip players, our star players, they went missing. And you can have an off day, but when one has an off day, you expect the others to rally round and carry them through. But they all seem to have an off day. And the last time I mentioned this was when we played Brentford away. And I know George Mitchell, who I know is watching, he carried it on the fans for him the next day. But if anyone watches that clip of them getting off the bus, it looked like it was an inconvenience for them to go and play a football match. It looked like they just, I wouldn't say come in for a party because I'm sure they hadn't, but they hadn't had much sleep, as if the fire alarm had been going off in the hotel. And it was just heads down and going in. It was like it was a chore rather than a privilege to represent Newcastle United. And we keep hearing how much they appreciate the fans. Yesterday, they didn't show it. And I don't want to say it's the worst performance of the season because there's probably been 5 or 6 similar performances. It's just the Man City. When you allow them, they'll punish you. But for me, at the end of the game, you would have thought it was just that I played Real Madrid in midweek and it was them that had the rest. And that's a sad indictment of where we are. Do we have to be at our very, very best to compete? And when we are, we normally win. Or can we not just get away with some scrappy wins like they did at the start of the season? But now it's just feast or famine. And that's worrying going forward. So when you've got players who we will laud and deservedly so when they play well, sometimes they've got to take the criticism when they haven't. And there was a lack of leadership. And that's not a criticism just to the captain, because there should be 11 leaders on the pitch, but no one seemed to want to take responsibility and say, yeah, we are better than this. And put the foot in, make a run, run at their defence, because we've seen their defence ship goals. I think they've lost half of the games in the last, was it 12 out of 24? So they lost half of their games. Yeah, we seem to just want to sit back and admire them and say, right, we'll soak your pressure up. We should have just went at them full throttle and pressed them. Because the only time we did that, the keeper made mistakes, or they kicked the ball into touch, and it seemed to be was a lack of confidence, a lack of belief, or was it just an error of acceptance that, nah, this is not going to be our day, and this should be rolling the sleeves up. And for me, I put it on Twitter when I was advertising this show, it was a meek surrender, and that's something that we shouldn't be associated with. And thankfully, we're not too often, and hopefully it won't happen again in the near future.
Manchester United have lost again to Spurs 1-0. Just about to text Melly, whilst Mitch gives us his views of the match yesterday and how he's feeling on reflection. Mitch.
Stu's used quite a few words I was going to use myself there, but I'll still use them anyway.
I left this way once for you.
How can we go to Man City, who are at the moment bedraggled and under fire? They can't seem to buy a win. They've got big games coming left, right, and centre, and not show a level of intensity that put them under any kind of pressure at all. We were so passive in the first 20 minutes. That's what lost us the game. That passivity, just allowing them to pass the ball the way they wanted. There seemed to be a lack of urgency, an overdue level of respect. Eddie's used this tactic before with Man City, and it's worked. And what he does, if you look, he shuffles the right fullback, right onto the touchline, so that he's touching the choke. And then the back four rearrange for Murphy to drop in between, so create a back five when out of possession. And the thought behind that apparently is to cut Gvardiol's movement off, because he's key to them going forward in many cases. When that's worked, we've had Tino there with his boots on the touchline. Trippier showed for me his lack of pace against Marmoush for at least 2 of those goals.
Yeah.
The one in particular when he was getting criticised for coming inside for trying to win the ball, why didn't he just stay with him? I'll tell you why he didn't just stay with him, because he knew he couldn't. I've seen people do that before in American football. Happens with cornerbacks who know the wide receivers quicker than them. And their only chance in certain situations when they know the quarterback's gone is to dive inside and at least try to disrupt, tip, or even intercept the pass, because they know that if the pass goes over them, they're burned. So they don't try keeping up with them because they're burned anyway. And I'm convinced that's why Trippier couldn't say, because it didn't look necessary for him to do that. But I suspect he knew he was never going to catch the lad up. I think that's also why we look better with Tino on in the second half. And the only 2 players that came out with any credit yesterday were the 2 subs for me. How irritated me with his post-match interview yesterday. It was another one of those where, had that been Bruce giving it, I think there would have been a lot more people unhappy. Using words like intensity and pressure. I would have been nice to have seen a bit of both, because I didn't see any of it. So, yes, he's got to protect his players and keep that, within the dressing room, etc. But, no, I won't have somebody paying me back and tell us it's raining. No matter who that is, whether that was Keegan, Robson, Bruce, anybody, you've got to call that out for what it is. Too many players look devoid of anything. Gordon seemed to have only a single pace and he looked knackered after 20 minutes, for example. Willock didn't just flit in and out the game, he just flitted out of the game. For me, it's easy for me to sit here with the benefit of hindsight because it makes us a genius. But, we should have begun with Miley in that role. And at least I suspect would have had a bit more energy and a bit more get up and go.
Hall was exposed because of it, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Very much so. He was exposed because he had Willock in front of him in one role, who just wasn't in the game, and Gordon up the other end, who just seemed to have zero acceleration going forwards or backwards. Very, very, strange situation. It was interesting before the game. I don't know what everybody at home had who couldn't get to the game, but on being for the half hour before the game, it was a very interesting, actually quite adult discussion between Gorilla Gloves and Andy Gray about would you have Haaland or would you have Isaac in your team? And it was actually a fantastic little section. They didn't try and sell him to Arsenal. They were just talking about how good Isaac is at Newcastle. But it was the argument that Gorilla Gloves gave about why he would stick with Haaland was evident on the pitch. In games when the team isn't firing, Haaland remains a simple threat through his physicality and his blunt instrument side to him that he has. Whereas in a game when the team's not firing, Isaac can go missing. And I'll give him his credit. He called that because that's exactly what happened yesterday. I mean, Isaac needs a bit of help, he needs a bit of service, whereas Haaland just needs a long ball. And that makes him difficult.
I was going to say there, I think at the start, we give them far too much respect and how to negate them. And we did to a point, because if you ask the majority of people watching who were their 2 star players, you would have said Foden and Haaland. And none of them had both of them didn't have a good game. But why did we go into that game like we did at Man United, like we did at Tottenham, like we did against Arsenal, and say, why don't you worry about us? This is what we've got.
I was back last night asking questions that we've asked on this show before at least 3 other times this season. And it comes down to this. Why is there such a chasm between Newcastle United at their best and Newcastle United at their worst? Because it's not a small gap. It's a chasm. It's gaping. And you can pick it up within 5 minutes of the kickoff. The body language of the players as a team gives it away. The body language and the energy in the side gives it away. Now, when we start a game like that, like we did against Bournemouth, for example, like we did at Brentford, there's no coming back from it. We just don't. The body language isn't right. And then the other time we weren't as good. I don't know what had happened at half time, but we come out after being 1-up against Fulham, like we had the game in the bag, and we didn't need to press it home, and we lost that game as well. And the difference between first half against Fulham, Newcastle, and second half Newcastle against Fulham is as big a gap between, say, the Newcastle that knocked Arsenal out of the cup and the Newcastle that played yesterday against Man City, and just basically went with the Vaseline already applied and no underwear on.
So, Mitch, I work with an Arsenal fan, and as soon as I went into work this morning, he says to us, "Why didn't you play like you did against us?"
Yeah.
Because they're now worried about Man City catching them into second. Why didn't you do that? But yeah, I mentioned Brentford before, and for anyone who said there's similarities between what Mitch has said and I've said, we genuinely haven't spoken since the game yesterday. So, it shows up the synopsis is quite similar. But the Brentford thing, that was when myself and then your dad did the next day highlight the body language, and that's my job. Like with sales, is to understand body language and the psychology. It didn't look right yesterday, but also the post-match outcry from what Eddie Howe said after the Brentford game. You said it was raining. Yesterday he said our intention was to go with intensity. There wasn't any. If you said we'd give it a go for 15, 20 minutes, and it wasn't, and they were chasing the shadows because they let themselves chase that shadows. And then the third similarity was the Bruno interview after the Brentford game.
Yes.
Where he had a very poor game.
Yeah.
And then he was blaming, pointing the fingers everywhere else, but as a captain saying, we are not happy with this. Well, that should have been done at half time. That should have been done after 10 minutes. That should have been done after 20 minutes on the pitch. So the similarities there, and hopefully the same reaction there was after the Brentford game, because that's when we went on that long unbeaten run, or winning streak, as it was, not an unbeaten run, it was a winning streak. So if we're looking for positives out of it, could we be worse again next week? I seriously doubt it. Will it hurt them? I would like to think so, but it didn't look like it yesterday. That's what really frustrated me more than anything.
I particularly after that game was pretty critical of Howe, and then he took on that unbeaten run. And yes, he's got every possibility that we'll do that again. But what I still don't have an answer to is why he has to do that again, because they're falling back down the mountain again.
Mitch, one of your phrases you've used so many times is square pegs and round holes.
Mm.
And for me, that's what it seemed like. Okay, and I'll highlight Trippier and Willock because, as I said, after the event, we could be wise, but they had played well in their previous respective games. But for me, it was just like they shouldn't have been playing in that game, and that's the horses for courses bit. But and again, is this a criticism of Eddie Howe or just how the club is? There doesn't seem to be where, right, you're not playing, that person's not playing, so you're the best person for that position against this team. It seems to be like numerical. Like, I've got my first 11, so you're number 12, you're number 13, you're number 14, you're number 15. And if there's 2 injuries, 12 and 13 come in, and I'll fix the team to accommodate that. We could have and should have, in my opinion, went for them from the start yesterday, and I think they would have folded. And at any stage we decided to up the tempo, we would have caused them problems. But it was just seemed to be an air of acceptance that we're beaten out. Even at 2-0 down, we've seen them concede. And if we had got one back straight after they scored their second, I know there was a dodgy offside against Gordon that wasn't offside. But if we had scored one straight away, you can imagine it would have been like a flock of seagulls in their back line thinking, here we go again. We've seen this video before.
And that crowd would have got nervous as well.
Exactly. But as Newcastle fans, after 10 minutes, we'd seen this video before. We knew it was going to be a long afternoon. we knew that we were going to get beat. It was just a case of how much. And thankfully, Man City decided to relax a bit because they've got a big game coming up next week. That could have been really, really, really detrimental to the rest of our season. And without exaggerating, had they kept their intensity up, they could have got 7 or 8 against us yesterday, and we would have had no excuses. And that's something that is very rare and should not be levelled at an Eddie Howe team. So whether it was the tactics, whether it was the lack of application from the players, or a combination of both, it's happened too many times this season for it to be a one-off. And I understand that the players, the team, the club is a much more advanced position than it was, but we can't keep giving people free passes. For all we expect is, or all they should be given as a minimum is their best. And there was too many people standing with hands on hips, just jogging about, or even walking in some instances, pointing the finger, saying, "Oh, well, he'll do the work." For us, as we are with the intensity, everyone has to be on it, in the word, and that's how there was. It was like a knock-on effect, wasn't it? Well, he's not doing it, so why should I? And as soon as someone doesn't, and then someone else doesn't, the press doesn't work, the midfield holding doesn't work, the defense coming out. It was simple, you know. The idea was to try and condense it. Well, what we'll do is we'll just knock the ball over to these aged defenders, and we'll have a foot race. And we played into their hands perfectly. And it wasn't a pet masterclass. For me, it was naivety on our behalf, and then acceptance that we got beat after 20 minutes. And we are better than that. That's what I think stings more than anything else. We know we're far better than that.
No, absolutely. And I take on board any argument that says, well, that's the difference when the mockery of PSR allows you to spend 75 million on a striker in the January transfer window versus a team that's had to weaken their squad effectively in the transfer window. But you can't hide behind that. That performance wasn't down to them having an injection of new blood, etc. That was purely down to us not performing at the level that we know we can, not performing and putting the graft in that we know we have done week in, week out. And once again, we've got to this position for me, maybe it's the 3rd time this season. And I feel like I'm no further forward with getting any answers as to why this happens. Yes, it's happened, and yes, we'll put it right, but I just don't understand why the gap between, the version of Newcastle United you go and buy in Harrods is so drastically different to Poundland Newcastle United, which was the one that turned up at Man City yesterday.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we get for unnecessarily changing my shirt.
I know. Why didn't we play black and white? I didn't understand that.
Grasping for superstitious reasons.
I know, but I really didn't understand that anyway. But I'm going to blame the ice cubes I put in my drink because they had sky blue in it, and so that was a Man City thing. But we can all be bad, but you start thinking, it's like, why did it happen? And are we just moaning? But do you know what? I purposely stayed off Twitter yesterday, like after the game, and I watched a few supposed reputable, shall we say, journalists or influencers, whatever you want to call them, who seem to thrive and speak with elation, with a moaning voice when we're not doing well. And it's like they get a kick out of it. Me, I just want to shut down. On good job I don't have a dog when we get beat. You know what I mean? Because the dog would have very bruised ribs. But some people seem to thrive on it and go, yeah, Newcastle did it. And you can hear in the voice, they're excited by it. It's like, why are you happy about something that's not happy?
It's the same with anything, Stu. Those who are reliant on engagement farming for their interactions, the ones who cannot deliver a positive message in any way, shape or form, realise that you get more engagement when there's trouble at mill.
Yeah, so it was like the news.
Yep. Interesting stuff. We could talk about that all day, but some people in the chat want us to talk about other things. Stephen Howe, good evening. He says, poor performance yesterday. The least said, the better. So going to focus on the APT positive instead, although Masters seems content to do his comical alley and play it all down. Yeah, lots to digest. I mean, it was the breaking news, I guess, at the weekend, and we broke it on the Amigos as it was happening. Michael says, now we've had a few days to think about it. What does the panel think of the APT rules? Stu, you haven't had time to comment on this. We had Keith on the show briefly on Friday as well. What's your feelings about this? This announcement at the weekend.
Well, do we smugly say we told you so and got shut down from it? And a lot of it stems from Keith. And if it's unlawful, if it's deemed unlawful, it can't go ahead. But on Friday, I was obviously out for a Valentine's meal. Then I tuned at the Amigos, and then I thought I was getting a lot of messages on Twitter like, what's my thoughts on that? So I started putting a few things out, which, like I say, regular viewers of the show say, oh, we've heard this before, we've heard it before. But we've been proven right once again. And I like that, stay humble, but it's true. We've been saying it for a long, long time. And I've got my other phone in my hands here because I wrote that many things that I just need to look at them to remind myself of what I was saying. But we could talk for hours about this on each and every different subject. But if you're in a position where clubs aren't allowed to what they deem as inflate sponsorship, as in fair market value, and there's one thing that Mitch and I have been consistent on, and we can be because we live here. We live in the Middle East. We live in the GCC. We know the pecking order. We know the pecking order of companies, etc. And I know I've said it on numerous occasions. How can 2 or 3 people sit in an office in London decide what is fair market value if a company decides they want to be associated with PIF? And I think we even talked about this last week or the week before, Steve. It's not right. They can't decide how beneficial that could be to that company. Yet they can pass through companies who don't even exist to other teams who don't threaten the cartel. And it's the indiscrepancies that have frustrated everyone else. And we have to be careful not to just look at it from a Newcastle bias, because obviously we are, but we have to also look at it as imagine we were still with Ashley and this was, I don't know, like say Everton, for example. PIF bought Everton, would we really be saying, yeah, let them spend what they want? So we have to have it, try and get it balanced out. But when you have people who are voting, what they didn't want, and it was quite clear it was called the Newcastle rules. So when that came in just a month after our takeover, and it was called the Newcastle rules, publicly, some people refer to it as that, but the press certainly did. What they're saying is, we don't want you to inflate your sponsorship. We don't want you to catch up. We had 15 years of starvation. None of these press people said in those 15 years, we need to look at this club for being neglected. They've got an owner who is not allowing these to thrive. He's not allowing these to grow. But as soon as they get owners who want them to grow and can clearly financially afford them to grow, oh, no, we don't want that, because the status quo will get knocked. But what they can do is, if you're certain clubs, and I won't mention them because we've just beat them over 2 legs in the semi-final, and it'd be wrong to mention them for liable cases. See the wink? They can borrow themselves, or one of their shareholders can give them money and call it a loan and not ask for it back, or ask for a very low rate of interest, which allows them to say that money is coming to their club. They can go and spend extra on players. What is the difference between that and sponsorship saying, I will give you more than what they want you to have? So it is like you're trying to get out of a swimming pool and someone's got your foot in your head. That's probably the best way of explaining it. and they're not letting us grow, but they were allowing others to grow. So quite clearly it was called, quite clearly it was exposed as illegal. And I know both of my learned friend, Dr. Neil Sir, on my right, probably your left, had said on numerous occasions, I'd had Mr. Hasty, that it's wrong, that we don't want to go down the corruption way, but it was biased and it was brought in to protect certain people. So when you've got a club that can say, okay, if there's a loan for 200 million, why can't we get 50 million extra on a sponsor? We're not even asking for parity. We're asking for the opportunity to grow. And they were stifling that, and it was proven illegal. So we both said, it doesn't matter how many cases there were, it was illegal. And if it's illegal, if it's unlawful, it wrecks the whole case. And we said that. We got laughed at. We got scorned at. We got scoffed at. We got called names. Good job we've got big shoulders. And guess what? It got proven right. What we were saying was right. And now the Premier League, nothing to say here. We'll change the rules. They brought a new rule in, or before the ruling in November, the new amended rules. What they did was cozy up to clubs because they needed the 14 votes. They cozied up to clubs such as Everton, such as Arsenal, such as Chelsea, and said, we will not count that if you vote for this. And which favoured them, and that got it over the line. But there was 4 clubs, as we know, it's Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, Man City and Aston Villa, who stood steadfast. Now, Manchester City said at the time, it's illegal, wait for the findings of the tribunal. Because it came out that they'd won 3 cases. And we've all heard Keith say, if you lose one, you lose them all, especially when the word unlawful was put in. So the City warned them, wait until the hearings, the findings come out from the tribunal and what the rulings are, or we'll sue you again. The Premier League, obviously under advice from certain clubs, decided, nah, that's not going to happen. What we'll do is we'll get more on the vote and push it through. And they did. And that's been proven to be illegal as well. Now, this could be the end. And I know I said it a couple of times in the past, and I was accused of over-dramatising. This could be the end of the Premier League as we know it, because it's not just a shameful loss. It's an illegal loss. And if they don't try and get Manchester City around the table without going into hearings or courtrooms or whatever and try and find a middle ground, their pride, and we all know pride comes before a fall, their misguided advice that have been given will be just exactly what Chris has said there. The house of cards will fall down on them. And we had the bigger case. I know I talked about it probably last week or the week before. Once we get through this, we've got UEFA. I don't think UEFA would fancy taking on a Man City or Newcastle once it's been proven in a court of law, or once a tribunal has proven that it's illegal what they've been doing. So there has to be middle ground, and I've been pretty steadfast in my opinions that I don't want to be in a position where we are sponsored £1 billion for a corner flag and we buy ourselves to win the league. I want to do it organically, and we're not that far away after despite the first half hour, we're not that far away. Maybe it's 3-4 quality players into that squad, and we have a genuine title challenging team. I'd rather do it the way we have been doing, but allowed to spend when we can and not be hampered by rules to suit others. And if you're running a corporation, if you're running a club, if you're running the league as they are, you've got to be fair to all members, not just a few favoured members. So hopefully there's middle ground and the sensible people decide, because if not, we will win everything. And I don't want to win it that way, because we've got more money than everyone else. And you have the people now in the press who said, if you remember back in October, Man City didn't win. They're just calling that. They're trying to be over-exaggerating what was said in the case. Don't worry about it. They had won. And we told you they'd won. Keith had told you they'd won. The lawyers had told you that won the cases. Everyone had told you Manchester City won that case. So now, do we really want to get to the point where we steamroller? I don't want the shine off it. And this is why this game, 4 weeks today, funny enough, by this time in 4 weeks' time, we could have broke a 70-year hoodoo and brought silverware back to Tyneside. And it's been done against the restrictions, against the tide. And that's what we're good at. When things are against us, we link arms and we stick together. And I'd rather our first trophy be under those circumstances than the floodgates financially have been opened and we can just go and play fantasy football, because that would, for me, murky the waters a little bit and it wouldn't be as sweet. But at the same time, we have been hammered, we have been restricted, and people could point, they've been allowed to spend this, that club's been allowed to spend that for 3 windows. So coming into this summer now will be our 4th window where we hadn't bought a player for the first team, not because we didn't want to, not because we couldn't afford to, it's because we weren't allowed to. So the rules were clearly set to favour a few. They've been proven to be illegal. They have been cleared as being illegal. They need to amend them because the Premier League can't afford another defeat. And Manchester City, 100% fact, will win that case that the new amended rules were illegal as well. And even if it's just on the case of one thing, whether that be the loans, whether that be the associate party transfers, who's judging that, they will win that case. And I think that the Premier League, whether it's naivety or bravado, saying to their fellow members, don't worry about this, it's hullabaloo, it's something out of nothing. They need to be more honest with themselves and more honest with the 20 members or the other 19 members to Manchester City and explain, we are in big mess. And I try my best not to swear there. We're in a big, big hole here, and we need to actually cower a bit and give something back. And my biggest fear is that there'll be 2, 3, possibly 4 clubs that will say, no, stick with it. The Premier League will adhere to what they're saying. And then there'll be a whole amount of skullduggery will come out over what's happened over the last few years, because it's been proven unlawful. So could we sue them? Technically, yes. Will we sue them? Probably not. But there has to be a middle ground now. There has to be a middle ground found for the sake of the league and for everything else. And for me, the simplest thing would be roll the rules back to 2021, just after our takeover. Let's go by those rules. Let's make it fair enough and say, right, a new owner comes in, he wants to improve his business. What is wrong with that? You have to spend money to make money. Yes, that's how it works. These people are willing to spend money, and now they should be given an allowance to say you can spend X amount, whether it's an extra £150 million, for example. There's been 3 years you've missed out spending that. Let's bring it back and let them then spend it, and then bring something that everyone agrees with. Because if not, and it does go to court or it does become tribunals, arbitrations, we're going to end up with a Super League. And I don't think any proper fan wants that. So I'll pass you on to Mitch, because I could talk all night about it.
Well, let's go to the interval, because we have reached the halfway point of the show. Have a quick breather. You can all take that in. Lots of questions coming in as well. I'll try and put them on the screen, and Mitch and the lads and Stu can have a look at them. But we'll have a quick break with the ads. We'll be back after this. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. Say hello to low-cost waste disposal with pay-as-you-go and contract waste management. Find them at their website, skipsandbins.com. Contact them, www.skipsandbins.com/contact. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find them at their website, mrvickys.co.uk, email info@mrvickys.co.uk, or telephone 01768 210 102. A big thanks to our fanzine sponsor, United Group Travel. 2 crew, driver and courier, local family company, 3-star plus quality hotels and no interchanges. All excursions included. Find them at their website, www.unitedgrouptravel.com. Email them at beverly.ugtl@gmail.com. Telephone 01670 632 460,
or mobile 0791 666 4174. Just £30 per person deposit. There are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. A big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the technical side of things. You can find them at their website, media-arts.co.uk. If you want to listen to us as a podcast, you can go to Sports Social Podcast Network. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, and your other podcast providers. If you want to help support the channel, hit the thumb up, which is the like button. Click share to share to your other social medias. Click join to join the channel. And click the subscribe button. We've also got links in our description for buy us a coffee and to be a Patreon member. Some events coming up. An afternoon with Sir Les Ferdinand, 6th of April, 12 till 4. Tickets available from ticketmaster.co.uk. No Covers takes place at the Clooney, Lilac Lane, Ryder and the Chris Norris Band. Tickets from theclooney.com or by telephone on 0191 230 4474. An evening with Steve Howie and Steve Watson, hosted by Joe Allen, takes place at the Tyneside Irish Centre on the 27th of June. Tickets for that are from newcastlelegends.com. An evening with Peter Beardsley and Chris Waddle takes place at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House on the 23rd of January 2026. Box office 0844 246 1000 or website tynetheatreandoperahouse.tv. An evening with Bad Manners takes place on Friday the 30th of January 2026 and tickets available from ticketmaster.co.uk. And we have copies of The Entertainers 1992 to 1997, Kevin Keegan's Legacy, available from newcastlelegends.com.
Okay, welcome back to NUFC Matters. It is the professionals, and if you are watching on Twitter, please jump onto YouTube and search NUFC Matters and hit the subscribe button. We've got over 600 of you watching on Twitter. That gives us a grand total of 1,100 watching live. We never take it for granted. Thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. We'll move on to football again in a minute. I have got that question. I will save that one, Neil, so I will come back to that one. But Mitch is going to give us his views on the BT story that broke on Friday, which was live on the Amigos. I mean, when it's live, it doesn't give you much chance to prepare. There's so many questions coming in about it. People saying that Mark Ritchie, for example, saying, do you know if the seller deal would have been worth more than what it is if it wasn't for the market values? Somebody else was asking, do you think we could potentially sue the Premier League now? Because we had to sell Yankuba Minte and we had to sell Elliot Anderson because of the rules that have been brought in. So many questions. I mean, we can't guarantee that we can give all the answers, unfortunately. And Denise just simply said, what can we do? What does this news mean for Newcastle United and in general?
It's in part now obvious what for at least a period of a week we could have done, because it's clear now that there was a period of a week to 2 weeks where there were no APT rules in place at all, effectively. And we could have drove a coach and horses through that, and part of me would have liked that. But like Stu says, how would that sit with us, effectively knowing we're getting a ridiculous amount of money for a corner flag, and we're getting a ridiculous amount of money for this and a ridiculous amount of money for that. Probably would have also lost to any allies that we have in football in terms of the Premier League. I think we would have pissed everybody off, including Man City, by doing something like that. And I think they have to be mindful of how the club wants to, and the owners want to do their business and how they want to be seen. Masters is hiding behind, we've got new rules in place. Yes, but the shaky ground is the very reason why there's now a second Man City challenge. You were told quite clearly, if just one of those elements is unlawful, it's all unlawful. They took the other approach, which was, we'll take the 3 or 4 points that were noted as unlawful, we'll roll them back, wrap it up with very little change elsewhere, mention something about shareholder loans, and we'll present that to the Premier League as a new structure. And so Man City's challenge now, I would presume, and I think, looking at the veiled comments that people like Nick DeMarco are making in some of the better legal minds in social media, it's basically saying they've presented a new set of rules to get that rushed through hurriedly and get as many votes through as they can, and 14 did. Those rules are based on a now proven unlawful structure, and therefore I see this second Man City challenge on APT as an absolute slam dunk. Now that will open the doors for everybody, not just us, for everybody. Do we have to wait until then? Yes, unfortunately, because the clubs voted those second APT rules in, even if some of them may have had an idea that they were based around a flawed and illegal structure. No matter how you amend it, it's like taking some gaffer tape with you to your car's MOT, failing a brake line and taping the line and saying, there you go. It doesn't work like that. That entire structure needs reframed and rebuilt from the bottom up. That would take time. That would take money that the Premier League is running out of, time that the Premier League doesn't have. And during that intervening time, there would be no APT rules in place at all for anybody. And I would say, if the first person to blink then causes a floodgate to allow a load of people to run a load of deals through with no rules overtopping it, and therefore that's a busted flush. I think the Premier League, day by day, to me, are looking more and more like a lame duck organisation. Their attitude is very bullish. They still have client journalists wanting to write on their behalf to tell us that all is well. Find it very interesting. As I was tweeted, as Matt Lawton's story broke in the Times on Friday Night Live on the Amigos by Chippy, and what unfolded from there, we'd finished the Amigos and then some before Sky Sports News even mentioned it.
Yeah.
And therefore, they still have, for whatever reason, the support of certain individuals who have a platform and a mouth to use. But they're looking increasingly silly. They are looking increasingly comical alley. Everything's okay. It's absolutely fine. Nothing to see here. The whole place is on fire. While I sip my coffee in the middle of it and tell you it's just a little warm today. And I think this is where we're at. Am I disappointed we didn't take advantage of that window? Part of us is, but I think very much so. The legacy of the owners of Newcastle United is, I think they will want to show that they managed to do everything in spite of what barriers were put in the way, and not because a loophole opened up and that enabled them to go mad one day and cheat the system. Because forever we would be answering that for anything we will in the future. In the minds of other supporters, would have a tiny little asterisk next to it that said, I put the cheated there. A bit like what Man City are going through at the minute. I think eventually the Premier League will have to open up and mediate and discuss, because it's the amount of money it's costing. Because they'll be going to other clubs saying, we're running this case and we need money off you as our members to fight these cases. And some of those clubs will be saying, hang on a minute, this isn't what we voted for. The only way forward I see for the Premier League out of this is more Jojo, not war, because they've not got a good record on the war side of it. And it's getting worse by the moment. As I say, I see the second Man City challenge as a slam dunk. You voted in a set of rules by your members. You presented them to a set of rules to your members, and these rules were based on a proven unlawful structure in the first place. Bang. And so,
sorry,
no, that's fine.
I was going to say, like, when you mentioned Sky's coverage, it's been so blatantly one-sided. Even today, I forget his name, but he speaks like this. That guy, Cabarro, I think his name is.
Oh, Caviar Solicol, yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and although he admitted through gritted teeth that it was a big victory for Man City, I can't remember who was co-hosting it with him. They brought out an article from Sam Wallace from the Telegraph, and they said, yeah, but what's going to happen is just, do we really want a league where Newcastle, bear in mind it's a Man City case, and they couldn't help but talk about Newcastle, where Manchester City and Newcastle become the dominant forces because they've got the most money. Well, I'm trying to speak like he does, but is that not what's happened? Is that not what they've been protecting, the cartel? Because they had the most money. They've had all the shiny marbles. And it's the easiest way for me to understand it and hopefully explain it is, let's call the cartel a monopoly. A group, it's a one, the monopoly. And if we make it so where people understand, it's like Tesco's. They're the biggest supermarket in the UK. It's like them saying to Aldi, you can't grow. You're not allowed to get more stores to increase your revenue. You've got to stay in your lane because we're the biggest and you're not allowed to get anywhere near us. You have to stay where you are. But then Aldi could use all the money that they've generated from Scandinavia or Western Europe and say, we're really going to try and hit this UK market and become a bigger player in the market, and being told they're not allowed to challenge because Tesco's and Asda's and Sainsbury's don't like that. So you're not allowed to. You've just got to put your money in and you're not allowed to get any more out. That's probably the best way I can understand it to explain it to those who are asking. Right, sorry for interrupting again, Mitch.
No, that's right. But you also got to remember Cavi Solicol's got his of Iranian background and has many ties to Qatar, so he's always going to have an Saudi lean. And just to go back to the geopolitics, we've not been there for a little while. But we've got to remember that these kind of things never go away, ever. You know, people in this region remember stuff back. Your great-grandfather killed my great-grandfather, and it gets all tribal like that, and it never gets forgotten. And so we shouldn't just brush that away as easily. But that's why some of these odd slants come from, and these odd takes. It finds roots somewhere, and if it's not in pure jealousy, it's in something geopolitical. But I do find it interesting how very differently these things have been presented by certain media outlets, and you can guess which ones it is. I haven't seen anything from Dan Roan at the BBC yet, but I can guarantee that'll be anti-Saudi. And if he can work something about human rights into his article, he'll have a damn good go at doing it. And it's mental. This is like, remember during the takeover, and Keith sometimes used to get sort of all wide-eyed when me and Hasty would be predicting who would say what in which media outlet and why.
Yeah.
And then the next week you'd be like, that's exactly what you said was going to happen. Yes, because you can read it like a book. Once you've been around it enough, once you've seen it enough and you heard it enough, you know where it's going to come. It's the same on this. Absolutely the same on this. It's quite horrific how badly some things are reported. That's interesting about if there was a guest saying we need financial rules in place so don't become like Spain or Italy, where there's one or two. But absolutely.
That's what I'm referring to. That was like, it's a 5-minute video.
Yeah. And so, you know, what you mean, the one or two in Spain who are so desperate for a bob, they're still keeping the Super League idea running because they've pulled all their financial levers and they're running out of money because they're absolutely you know, hooked up to the hilt with debt, and they can't get around some of the rules that La Liga have in place. It seems to be there's still a cohort of what you would call legacy clubs who are all indebted to the tune of billions, who see that any financial regulation makes it difficult for them to function and bully other people the way they always have. And they're trying to find ways, be that by circumnavigating regional bodies or by trying to exert undue influence on regional bodies to keep a status quo. When you've got so many clubs coming in with owners who can spend, want to spend. Look at even what the owners of Birmingham City want to do. That's fine at League One. It'll be kind of okay in the Championship because the only other body that's worse run than the EPL is the EFL, to be honest with you. But when they get to the Premier League, the brakes will be humped on them as well. That's how it works.
Mitch,
and that's what needs to be broken. And that's what needs to be changed. Now, what can we do about it? Do we have any legal skin in the game? Yeah, probably somewhere. As Keith keeps saying, anybody who can show a demonstrable loss often has a skin in the game from a competition point of view. Would be being forced to sell Anderson and Minte to comply with the rules at the very last minute. Be seen as a demonstrable loss, possibly. Certainly if there's deals that have been vetoed by the Premier League, or say, for example, the Seller shirt front deal, if we'd asked for more and they've knocked it down, that would be a demonstrable loss. But it's why so many other people then have potential skin in the game. Tim, it's quite right. There's teams who vote for things, and it always looks like Turkey's voting for Christmas to me, that they can't see. But this is something I've gone back to time and again with Mr. Hasty when it comes to football finances. Football clubs in general have shown repeatedly, particularly over the last 10 years with some of the things we've had to deal with, like COVID and things like that, that they talk a good game when it comes to collective bargaining and the greater good of the game. But when push comes to shove and they've got to vote for something, they vote for self-interest. They vote to either keep somebody out of a situation that would see them knocked down, to keep somebody down the division who would come up and be a threat to their position. Clubs like Status Quo, and they can actually then sort of potter on and exist and give their fans the semblance that they're doing the best and a little bit of false hope. But in reality, it's all about keeping the head above water and fear of change and fear of the new, and they all vote in predictable ways, and they vote in the way that suits them best now. They can never vote with what suits the greater good of the game in 10 years' time, because they don't care about the good of the game in 10 years' time. They just care about their position right now.
Sorry, Steve, just two more points before we move on, because I know we've got lots to talk about. But one thing I want to ask for those back home who have Sky subscription, just ask yourself this: had Man City lost that case, there would have been wall-to-wall coverage from Sky, and that tells you what side they're sitting on. And I know one of my most recent favourite phrases is horses for courses, but I love Mitch's one that he first said, and I've repeated probably more times than he has, but I love it. And it's American money good, Arab money bad. And that opens a bigger picture to anything else. And there was just a comment there from your dad, Mitch. I'm just trying to find it. What about the clubs that lost points? Do you not think Forest will sue? Everton, I don't think Everton will, because they changed the rules to suit them regarding the loans. But Forest, they've got a case, and they've got a chairman who is passionate enough to say, do you know what? I'll put the money down. I'll go for it.
Everton's new owner might just not want to rock the boat right now.
Yeah.
And they're American based, remember.
Exactly.
But Forest's owner has got a history.
Absolutely has.
And
Bear in mind also
correct.
the richest man in Egypt who has a huge share at Aston Villa.
Yes.
We know the temperament of and they could go for it. So I personally would be flabbergasted if it gets to the stage where the wait for the second rule coming out, the second challenge to the APT, the new one, because the phrase they used there was slam dunk. It's clear as clear can be that Manchester City will win that again. And for those who think that has an effect on the 115 or whatever, how many charges they've trumped up against them, it doesn't have an effect. But psychologically and publicly, they see Manchester City. It's clever how they've done it, how they've beat the Premier League again and again and again. But this APT rule was brought in 2021. The charges against Man City are from well before that. It's a period before that. But I know Mitch touched on it in the Migos on Friday, where he quite clearly said they had done things and then they changed the rules. That's what they're trying to charge him with. It's like the blind leading the blind, isn't it? It really is. And I very rarely swear, but it's a clusterfuck. That's what's happening from the Premier League. They're getting advised really badly and without casting aspersions against certain, shall we say, institutions. For me, it's obvious where their advice is coming from. And there may be a bit of, if you don't do this, we will expose this. And that's where the House of Cards comes in. And we've seen the photographs of certain members of certain clubs' boards sitting together. And we've heard we don't want another Leicester happening. We don't want this happening. And it's a cartel. And I know Keith's got a dossier enough. He could drive a coach and horses through it if he was financially backed. They don't need this. The Premier League, as I've said on numerous occasions, their brand will be trashed if they let this go to the second APT hearing. They have to try and find a happy medium somewhere before now and next month.
Okay, let's move on to football again. Thanks for talking through that, lads. A couple of questions. We'll take this one from Lisa's. Both Bruno and Byrne have been captain this season. Who do you think leads the team better, Mitch?
Well,
it's a difficult question, isn't it?
Steve, I lost you totally there, mate. Can't hear you.
It's a difficult question. I thought you were pausing for dramatic effect.
No, I just couldn't hear what you said. Who leads the team better?
Yeah.
Difficult to say. Because I ultimately think Trippier leads the team better than both of them, personally. And we've seen a little bit of that in the games. And that's the other thing that irritated us yesterday. It's like, I know there's multiple people have the potential to be leaders on that pitch. So where are you all? You can see in the huddle before both the Arsenal games, multiple voices in that huddle. It wasn't just Bruno, you could see it. Multiple voices giving their input, giving their J up. And then those multiple voices turned into a squeaky church mouse yesterday, it would seem. And then when Bruno's saying what he said after the game yesterday, which was similar to what he said after Brentford, he himself was substituted after 70 minutes. So is he referring to himself in those comments as well? If I was his teammate, I'd be a bit pissed at that. Everybody's got different styles of leadership and different ways of being. What Dan Byrne brings, obviously, is heart and passion about and love of the club, and he's a local lad, etc., etc. And that's probably a different type of leadership. But whereas is a commanding person? Is he a genuinely commanding presence to be that kind of leader? Very difficult. But Bruno's the nominated captain. That's what we roll with at the moment. And that's what for me, that's what we've got to stick with. We can't be peeing around with that now.
Stu?
Well, I'll get off the fence and I'll say I think probably against the run of play, I think Bruno's a better captain. I think he has more respect for his technical and footballing abilities. And if we are going to be where we aspire to be, although he's had a fantastic season, Dan Burn shouldn't be in our team. And Bruno should be. If everyone could say, right, we'll pick 3 or 4 new players for next season, you'd still have Bruno in the team, you wouldn't have Dan Burn in the team. And that's it sounds disrespectful to Dan Burn because I think he's been absolutely amazing. But I'll put it another way. Who was Man United's captain when they won the treble? Who was Liverpool's captains when they won the European Cup? And this follows on for what Mitch is just saying. Some people might know the answer, some people might not, because all 11 people, or at least 6 or 7 of those team are leaders, natural born leaders, and that's what we missed yesterday. So when we're not doing well, people want to criticise Bruno, but when we've got 9 games winning successively, no one criticised Bruno. So I get it. Dan Burns, the chest thump and roll the sleeves up, archetypical centre half who has all the passion and the will for Newcastle United. But I don't think I've seen too many, and I'll say this, and I don't mean to sound xenophobic when I say this, foreigners, because he's from the other side of the world, who love playing for Newcastle as much as what Bruno does. So he understands what it is to be for Newcastle. Yeah, he's not vocal. He's not the John Terry type. But at the same time, the game's changed. So I get it when people are saying, yeah, it should be Bruno or it should be Burn. I understand there's an argument to that. But for me, you could have the best captain I think we could have going into next season would be Botman. That would be my choice of captain. Someone who has that physical presence, intimidating presence, but has the respect of the dressing room, but also will lead by example. And same as what Burn does, he'll put his body on the line, but he's got immeasurably more talent. And please don't take this as a slight on Dan Burn, and I will repeat, I think he's probably been our player of the season for commitment. But I don't think we should be divisive enough to criticise Bruno's captainship. He didn't ask for it, he was given it. And that might have been to keep him at the club, and we should be grateful that he still is at the club, irrespective of the odd bad performance. We wouldn't have as many points as we have without him linking up with Tonali, without him slicing those, threading balls through for Isaac, without him playing in tandem with Joe Linton. He, for me, is the glue that keeps that team together at the moment from the position he's playing in the squad that we have. So that, for me, I would say Bruno should be captain over Burn, but I can understand why people are saying Burn, but we have to start moving forward and stop being sentimental about it. It shouldn't matter who's captain. I've seen someone mention Anthony Gordon there. Yeah, once he gets his head right and decides to roll his sleeves up every week and play when he can, as good as he can do, he's another captain. But throw another question at you. Was Shearer the best captain for Newcastle United, or did he get it because of his status? Because for me, Gary Speed would have been a better captain. You know, so that Rob Lee could have been a better captain. There's so many you could say. I don't think the role of captain is as important now as it used to be, because it used to be you get an extra £100 on your wages. I don't think that matters to how much these get paid now. If we want to say who's the best captain at the club, for me, it's the club captain. And I'll revert back to my dream where him and Bruno will off that trophy next month with black and white ribbons dangling off it. So if you want your best choice for captain, Lascelles, out of those two, makes no difference. But Bruno will start more games than Burn going forward for the next 2 or 3 years, provided they're both still at the club.
Okay, good question. Certainly it generates a bit of debate. Let's think carefully about the next question because we want to finish up with something a little bit different. We've done sponsorships. Lots of people asking us about sponsorships, and lots of people want to talk about Alexander Isak and stories in the papers. We don't really want to be looking at speculation. Darren says, question for the lads. Do you think lack of competition for places is letting the players not give 100% every game? It's an interesting one. I mean, it comes back to the size of the squad, but I just think it's energy levels, Mitch. I genuinely think that he trains them hard. I still think it comes down to this whole training mantra that he's got. I know Bunce has come in and things are supposed to be slightly different. I saw some people saying that Newcastle looked shattered, looked tired, lazy. I've heard people saying it's the way they get off the bus. I mean, there's got to be a reason why every now and then we just have these kind of catastrophic performances, where we get humped 4-0 by a team that's around us, which next week we could probably beat if we're fully comprehensive.
Like I said earlier, Steve, I've been here 3 times this season, and I can't give you an answer. Can't. I would like to think if Eddie thought somebody was taking the piss because he thought he was undroppable, that he would be dropped so hard that his arse would be hurting for the next fortnight and that he'd never even sit on the bench for a little while. If there was any mindset like that in our dressing room and it was palpable and provable, I can't see Eddie Howe tolerating that. Bearing in mind, he's covered all sorts up for other individuals over the last few years that we know about. But I think that would be a non-negotiable from Eddie. That if there was somebody not trying because he thought he was undroppable and he had nobody pushing him for his place, I think he'd be shown what would happen by being dropped exactly. I just can't see that being allowed. And it's certainly from my point of view, if I found out there was a player acting like that and behaving like that, I would want him out of our club. I would never want to see him in a black and white shirt again. That I think is an unforgivable attitude.
Okay. Stu?
I forgot the question.
It's the 100%. It's the 100% thing. Our players likely to give 100% if they haven't got a player behind them. If they're not putting. I
was joking, Steve.
Right.
The thing is, you said it before, and it doesn't really frustrate us when I get upset by it. But it becomes laughable when I say we don't have a squad big enough. We get 25 players the same as every other team. What we're saying is we don't have a quality of the squad good enough. And that goes back to what we've been discussing all evening, isn't it? There's the huge drop-off between the first 11 and the second 11. And that's it. So I get it where people say some people know they're not going to get dropped regardless. And if you look at how... I'll use Anthony Gordon as an example because he's the first player that come to my head. When he first joined us, he had to fight for his place. He got taken off. Strange enough about Brentford, he got subbed on and then subbed off when he was doing a bit of kidology, pretend he was injured, and he threw his toys out the pram. He didn't play in the cup final, etc. And then he knew he had a lot to prove. And same as all of us, when we've got something to prove, we try harder. But once Man City is an example, once you start winning on a regular basis, you can't have a drop-off. And maybe some of our players that know they can have a stinker and still get picked. But that's due to the lack of quality within the squad. And for me, if you looked at yesterday, Murphy, if he had been playing in his natural position, I thought there was no point in playing him as a second right back, because that's what he looked like. He looked like we had 2 right backs. As a second right back, you might as well have played Tyne or a Kraft. Why play Murphy there? If Murphy's on the pitch, it's to be up front, use his pace, get the ball in the box, or take a pot shot now and again. And if he's not in a role to do that, then don't play him. So the depth of the squad, as in quality-wise, is what's alarming. And that's, again, as I said, we've covered it with the PSR, financial fair play, blah, 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 blah. I'm not too concerned where we're going, because I know where we're going is going to be bigger and better. But I think sometimes we either try to justify failure or excuse not getting success. And that's the mindset. I know it gets called Stockholm Syndrome, etc. But that's the mindset that we have to change. And when we get questions like that, you have people who, can they be dropped? They should be dropped. And I know exactly the player Mitch was referring to when he was saying his part. But if you think you're untouchable, how do I use it? Look at Conor McGregor. When he first started his career, he was hungry, he was greedy, he was devastating. And then as soon as he got the trappings of success, his performance dropped off. Now, that then goes back to the squad, it goes back to the management. But I do get it. I think there is certain times when people think they couldn't be dropped. But that goes to what I said at the start of the show. You had a good game against Birmingham, so we'll play you irrespective because you're the next cab off the rank, as Simon Jordan says. Or you had a good game against Arsenal, so we'll play you, even though we know that you're slow and they're playing a flying winger. We won't play our fast fullback. We'll play you. And sometimes they're trying to please too many people, where I think you have to be, how do I say that? It sounds like Sultana or Raisin. You have to be a bit of one of those, begins with a C, to get the best out of people. Yet sometimes people have to feel like they've been hard done to give the reaction. You know, the cause a reaction to get a reaction. But if someone said, I had a good game that game, so I'm going to get picked, that's not how it should be. And I honestly believe that come the summer and we're allowed to spend money, I think Eddie Howe knows exactly where he needs to improve. He knows exactly the standard of quality. And if Bruno is the standard bearer, I want a team where Bruno is fearful of his position. I want a team where Tonali is fearful of his position. I want a team where 10 players are fearful of the position except Isaac, because he's the only genuine world-class player that we have at the moment. Tonali's probably the second best on current form, but he's had a stinker the last few games. But class is permanent, form is temporary. But for me, Isaac, the best thing that can come from this APT ruling is where we can gain more money and give him what he wants to stay. And then we can put all the rumours to bed. He's staying with us, and we're going to convince him we're going to bring not in just 1 or 2 players. We're going to go and bring 4 or 5 players in, and we're going for the league next season. Do you want to be part of it? Because that's what we're going to do. Or do you want to go to somewhere else who we've just beaten comfortably 3 times? Probably 4 times if we get another shot of them as it goes on, because they'll have nothing to play for then, and we might just have something to play for when we play Arsenal at the end of the season. I think that we can keep Isaac, and for me, he should be our talisman, and everyone else should be fearful of their position. So I do get the question, or some people think, well, I can put a subpar performance in. And that's the difference with the quality of the squad, not the numbers in the squad, it's the quality. Because if you look at the league leaders at the moment, Liverpool, they've got probably 6 players. The only person undroppable for them is Salah. So why can't we have Isaac as the only undroppable person? Haaland's undroppable for Man City. Everyone needs that sprinkling of stardust. But if you look across the rest of the front line for Liverpool, they've got 2 quality players for each position, same as in midfield. We don't have that yet. And we've been stopped having that illegally for the last 3 years, and we just go around in circles again from the start of the show. So just to summarize, Steve, I think yes is the answer to the question. We do have players who sometimes can go on easy street, but influx of quality players ups the games, just like he did with Gordon when we signed Harvey Barnes. He took his game to the next level. And once we get more people competing, that's when we have a squad, and that's when we consistently start challenging and winning trophies.
Great stuff. Great show. Thank you to Mitch. Thank you to Stu. Thanks to everybody watching. Back tomorrow with the Fans Forum at 6 o'clock. That should be lively. Have a good end of the day. And I am going to watch the BAFTAs with a bit of cake and a cup of tea. How very lovely of us. Take care, lads.
Enjoy the rest of your birthday.